everybody. Hi, Kathy Frey here from IMCO, and welcome along. I can just see some numbers starting to click on in. Yeah, so welcome everybody to this week's Maternity Natural Health webinar hosted by IMCO. And today we have the gorgeous Emily. So have a wave, Emily. Say hello.
Hello, everybody.
And Emily so this webinar is currently being recorded in New Zealand. And Emily married a Kiwi, so she can give a little bit of a story there, I think. And I'm very excited to hear about this topic today. And it's, oh boy, postnatal depletion. Oh, yeah, a woman suffering terribly afterwards with that. So look, with you lovely ladies who are starting to sign in, please, well, it's not just ladies, please do put into the chat whereabouts you are in the world and your health profession, or maybe you are a expectant mum. So it's nice to know where everybody is. We've got some hellos here from California. That's great. And yeah, so we're going to start this session in a moment. So also just a reminder that down the bottom is the Q&A session. Sorry, the Q&A little box. So if you've got any questions for Emily, please just type them in there and we'll absolutely make sure that we get through those before the end. So what's going to be happening in the little in today is that very shortly Emily's going to start her presentation, and she's going to be doing it for about half an hour with a PowerPoint, and those slides, if you want to receive copies of those, you'll get instructions on that tomorrow. So that's all good, automatically into your inboxes, and then we'll sort of, after she's finished that, then we'll go and do our Q&A session. But yeah, so look, welcome Emily. It's just so good to have you here. And Emily is a qualified nutritionist and a medical herbalist, fantastic combination, with over a decade of experience. And she currently lives in Saskatchewan in Canada. And I'm not sure if I've said that completely.
Very good, correctly. Well done.
Yeah, and she runs a natural medicine. She runs natural medicine workshops and seminars, and she does freelance writing for the natural health companies and maintains a clinical practice. And she's got a popular online meal program, and she's also a mum of a toddler called Ivy, and who might make an appearance later, but and also her website is Health, I should say, Health. And Pohutakawa is probably New Zealand's one of New Zealand's most famous trees. So she might explain that background to her website, because we were giggling earlier about how confusing that name might be for everyone else in the world on how to pronounce your website. But welcome, Emily. So please introduce yourself, and I'll let you take over your with the slide presentation.
Cool. Thanks so much, Kathy. Hi, everybody. My name is Emily, and yeah, as you can probably hear, I don't have a Kiwi accent. I am Canadian, but I lived in New Zealand for over 12 years, and yeah, studied there and worked there, and I'll talk a little bit about my background when we do the presentation. But it's obviously a really important part of my life, and I kind of say I went backpacking to New Zealand and never came home, and then I married a Kiwi and brought him back with me as well. So today we're going to chat about a topic which I think is super important and which I have experienced personally, which is postnatal depletion. And it's kind of something that isn't necessarily like a diagnostic term, but I think when you say it, parents know what you're talking about. So I'm just going to get straight into it. I will share my screen and start the slides with you all. And let's get cranking. Cool, and hopefully the technology doesn't fail us. This is all very Wi-Fi dependent these days, isn't it? Yeah, so this is Postnatal Depletion. My business is Bahutakawa Natural Health. Like Kathy said, I'm a nutritionist and medical herbalist. I actually studied at the South Pacific College of Natural Medicine in Auckland. So in New Zealand, I call myself a naturopath, but there's like legalities around that in Canada. So we don't call ourselves that here. And I actually recently changed my business name to Bahutakawa, even though I realized that probably nobody here could pronounce it or would know what I was talking about. But it just felt really important to me to have that connection to the sort of like my New Zealand roots, because New Zealand is really where I decided that working in natural health was like the career path for me. And so a dear friend of mine who is a designer and a New Zealander made my gorgeous logo, which I just love. And I just practice on Instagram all the time saying Bahutakawa, everybody say it with me, and it seems to work. Okay, so today, let's make sure I can just, here we go. Okay, so overview, what are we going to talk about today? What is postnatal depletion? That's the first topic that everybody wants to know. Things I wish I'd asked for when people said, how can I help? So I'm going to talk in this presentation as both a new mom and as a practitioner. So it was kind of like this balance of having the hands-on experience of feeling very depleted and then having these kind of like the skills and background and friends and family and resources to, you know, help me get through it. That was really helpful for me. Things you can eat with one hand. I think this is so important, and it was really vital for me. And breastfeeding friendly herbs and supplements. This is like the beef of the presentation, to support you or your clients' energy, stress levels, adrenals, rest, and sleep. So that's kind of the main things that we're going to talk about today. But here is my little intro. Hey, I'm Emily. That is a picture of me in the top left, and my first ever health shop job. Anybody who is from Dunedin, or anybody who studied in Dunedin, might recognize that is Sunray Health 2000 in the city center mall. And that was like 2007, I think, when I first started working there. So yeah, so plants were around when I was growing up. My parents were kind of hippies. We had a big veggie garden. There was always like chamomile and peppermint around. And at the same time, I was like a super earachy kid, and I had tons of antibiotics growing up. So, you know, I wasn't a totally natural kid growing up, but there were plants around all the time, which I always kind of think helped to normalize the use of them. So I lived in New Zealand for a lot of years. I have a bachelor's degree from Otago, and yeah, married a Kiwi. And then when I started looking into and wanting to be involved in natural medicine, the first health shop that I worked at was Sunray in Dunedin, and still have some very dear friends that are there and the owners. I studied at the South Pacific College of Natural Medicine in Auckland, like I said, and came out with a Bachelor of Natural Medicine in 2013. And I feel like the training that I had there was both very evidence-based and like lots of research and learning how to really discern good research, and hands-on. So that college has a very good teaching garden. So we had like an organic medicinal garden outside, and within that, you know, we would learn to like identify the plants and use them and sort of see how they worked and what they were like in real life, hands-on. So it was a really nice balanced sort of approach. I started working in clinic in 2014. Again, we moved back down to Dunedin where my husband's family was, and I worked in clinic there. I also worked as the research and development manager for Artemis. Kiwis might be familiar with the company Artemis. It's a traditional plant medicine company that makes teas and tinctures and creams. And in that role, I spent a lot of time researching and doing education for the public and for health shop owners and for pharmacists. And Yeah, and then balancing this out with kind of time with the plants, you know, so when a batch of herbs would come in, my job was to like make sure that they were all really correct. And once a year, Artemis does a massive thyme harvest in central Otago, and it was like all hands on deck, 12-hour days, backbreaking labor of picking medicinal plants. So again, a really nice kind of balance of this hands-on and you know, research-based work. Moved back to Canada in 2015 to be closer to my family. And in 2019, I had Ivy, who I always joke is hashtag named after a plant. And we decided to move back to Saskatchewan to be closer to my family because, as I'm going to discuss, one of the major factors with postnatal depletion is really like community and lack of support. I'm just moving my own face around here so I can see my slides. So what is postnatal depletion? This concept was first introduced to me by a friend, sorry, that's my dog, and fellow colleague Sky, who is a Dunedin practitioner, after she had her son, and she really talked to me about wanting to work with people with postnatal depletion. At the time I was like, postnatal depletion, like what's that? And then I had Ivy in March of 2019, and by June I was like, oh, postnatal depletion, that's what you're talking about. This is a picture of Ivy and I, by the way, her giving lots of attitude. We came to New Zealand in February this year and had a quick trip to Fiji, and we just snuck it in under the wire, got home on the 4th of March, which was really, really lucky. So when I use this term with parents, there's often this kind of like intuitive knowing. So even if you don't really, even if it's not like necessarily like an official diagnosis, people are like, oh yeah, postnatal depletion. I understand what feeling depleted is like. So really the concept is that pregnancy, birth, breastfeeding or bottle feeding, and sleep deprivation, you know, parenting is a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. There are huge physical demands on the pregnant parent, including increased nutrient requirements. So I think we often talk about like how many more calories you need to eat, but it's not just about calories, right? We all know that that baby is also requiring really specific nutrients. And a lot of us go into pregnancy without optimal nutrition levels, right? So I have a dear friend who's a midwife, and she said she has basically never seen anybody's first trimester iron levels be adequate. So that means generally people are going in low. And then there's so much focus on pregnancy and birth and support for pregnancy and birth. I mean, I'm sure most of us would argue that there's still not enough, but the support often tapers off after the newborn stage. And the sleep deprivation and increased demands on the parents obviously continues for quite a long time. Maybe till they're 18, maybe till they're 30, who knows? So some of the symptoms of postnatal depletion, it's kind of like this phenomenon of a satellite of symptoms. So fatigue is one of the main ones that we see. Poor concentration, poor memory. People just call it baby brain, and we kind of write it off, but it's like, you know, anybody who's done it knows it's a real thing. That sometimes contributes to people forgetting to eat or drink, or just, you know, like it just doesn't cross their mind because they're just so busy and so kind of foggy. Feeling wired and tired. And this is a big one. And I see this in practice all the time with people, regardless of parenting status, that people are knackered and also very wired at the same time. So this kind of hypervigilance, and hypervigilance is like an important and natural and normal hormonal response to having a new human to look afterwards, but it can just kind of go a bit over the top, and that sort of can contribute to some of this depletion. People have often described this feeling to me as feeling shaky on the inside. So it'll often happen that people go to lie down and finally rest, and their body feels kind of shaky, like they've had, you know, like 3 cups of coffee or something when they haven't had any. And it often means that people are too wired to sleep, which is a huge problem, especially when everybody says, oh, just sleep when the baby sleeps, which we all know can be really annoying advice. And feeling overwhelmed and stretched really thin. So those are the main sort of symptoms. Let's check my notes here. So the causes of this, again, from sort of like my research and understanding, hormones are a big one, right? So there are wild changes during pregnancy and after birth. Add in the continued changes with breastfeeding and prolactin levels, the return of ovulation and periods, changes in breast milk production premenstrually. This was something that was a real surprise to me that I didn't know about. Ivy is a crazy breastfeeder. She's like probably going to breastfeed till she's 11. But so I didn't have any issues there, which I was really grateful for. But my period came back 3 months postpartum. And to this day, at 18 months, every time I am premenstrual, sorry, the fly, my breast milk production dropped and she nurses like crazy. And so often, like the few days leading up to my period, she is awake a lot at night. And that, on top of, PMS means that I'm very, very tired and very, very irritable by the time things kind of, by the time my period comes. And that has happened every single month. And it's quite a common phenomenon, but it wasn't something that I was prepared for. Nutrient deficiencies, low grade or overt. So whether that's just like a nutrient insufficiency or a full-on deficiency. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this when I get into the specifics, which ones we can test for, which ones we don't have testing for, which ones, what we should kind of look for basically. Sleep deprivation, I feel like I've said that like 5 times, but obviously that's hugely important. The emotional and mental and spiritual upheaval of having a human to look after, that is massive. And that change in people's identities, I think, can really throw them for a loop, and without really having a lot of time to process that. Never mind, time to process their birth, whatever happened there, right? So that's a whole big world that could cause this issue in and of itself. That's just part of the package. And cultural expectations and lack of support. And this is kind of my hot topic, because I really think this condition has a lot to do with like the insular way that we as a Western society sort of function. Many of us have heard of these traditional cultures that support parents for 40 days after birth, or just in general live in more, more community-based living. Is that the word I'm trying to say? Yeah, like more like, larger family units, larger communities where the parenting and the housework and the cooking and all these things are more shared, as opposed to our Western society where we kind of live in a more nuclear family base and each family is expected to do all that work on their own. I think that another issue that as a society, we tend to acknowledge that parenting a newborn is crazy and wild and exhausting, but we don't normalize or discuss the fact that it doesn't stop at the newborn stage, that after 3 or 4 months they are still just as exhausting and sometimes worse, because then you add in sleep regressions and all sorts of things like that, and then that contributes to this really very Western phenomenon of sleep training, which that's like a whole other presentation in and of itself. But I think it's important just to acknowledge that sleep training is something that we do in the West that nobody else really does. And I think part of that has to do with the way our sort of culture is set up and the expectations that we have on families and parents. And we just haven't normalized or widely publicized that parenting continues to be exhausting, for months and years, really, for a lot of people. Or that most health authorities recommend breastfeeding up until the age of 2, or that, kids are just full on in general. So I think these are all kind of expectations that we just need to start shifting a little bit more and having more kind of conversations about. And there's been some research into this, and some experts think that this condition, this postnatal depletion, can continue for up to a decade after a child is born. So, add into that multiple children and you can see that, we probably have an epidemic of this. What about postnatal depression? And I just wanted to touch on this because I want to kind of clarify that these things are different and yet interrelated. So postnatal depletion isn't really a condition. It's not in the DSM, we're not talking about something that a doctor is going to diagnose. But again, like I said, I think it's something that a lot of parents kind of intuitively feel is just, you know, really depleted. And I think it's worthwhile investigating and supporting people who are feeling depleted, even if it's not a real condition, right? Inverted commas. So there definitely are some interrelated components of postnatal depression and this depletion. So postnatal or postpartum depression, which I've just called PPD, can be contributed by a depletion of specific nutrients and all those things that I talked about, like sleep deprivation and lack of support and community and things like that. But the symptoms of it are just a little bit different, right? So with postpartum depression, we're talking a little bit more, God, sorry, flies, about you know, sadness and anxiety, feeling numb, really low energy. And like I said, some of those aspects can be in postnatal depletion as well. But I would say if it starts to sort of, if postnatal depletion starts to sort of morph into more of a depressive picture, you want to be looking at it differently. I mean, still holistically, obviously, but a little bit different. So yeah, a lot of people that I've spoken to, and this has kind of been like in my research, have said, I don't feel depressed, or I don't really have anxiety, but I am exhausted. I do feel overwhelmed. I do feel stretched. And like, I do feel, you know, empty or depleted. And I still think that warrants attention. So that's basically kind of the idea of that. So what can we do about it? This is the important part, right? Everyone wants to know this. Be prepared. And again, as like, you know, midwives and healthcare practitioners, I think you guys are in a really great position to support people who, you know, and like prep them for kind of some of the issues ahead with really practical tips, which is what I'm hoping to present today. Or if you are a pregnant parent, then you also can, you know, be prepared by having some information up your sleeve and getting a few things in place. Asking for help, which is, you know, often the hardest thing. And again, maybe not a big part of our like culture to ask for help, but again, just probably the most important thing you can do. Find like-minded support, parents or groups. Facebook groups can be really great if no one that you know in real life wants to parent like you. And I have a couple of Facebook groups that I really love that I'm happy to share, which I can do in the questions at the end, so you can write them down. I found groups that focused on biologically normal infants, biologically normal behavior, as opposed to sort of like cultural expectations, was really hugely crucial for me, and not that easy to find, which I found surprising, especially because I kind of know how to research stuff, you know? So yeah, those are kind of things we could do. And, you know, I think it's important to find like-minded people, because nobody wants unsolicited advice from somebody who has a different philosophy than them. Nutrition. So I'm going to talk about this. And this is, I find this like interesting dichotomy. We want to both lower the bar for new parents and also set yourself up as best you can. And herbs and supplements as allies and extra support. And I just think you'll just need it. So just use it. You know, just get that ready anytime you can. Okay, I'm just gonna have a sip of water here. Forget cute onesies. Things I wish I'd asked for when people said, how can I help? And I just thought this was kind of funny because, you know, cute onesies are great and a million muslin blankets are really useful, but this is kind of like the meat of what I wish I'd asked for when people were kind of asking like what you can do to help. This cute little picture, this exhale parenting thing you can see on the side, that is actually a fridge magnet that I got from my sister, who is a postpartum doula. And that's a wonderful resource if you have postpartum doulas available. It's not a super common thing, but I think it should become more common. I think there's a real market for that. You know, people who come in after a baby is born and support new parents in a variety of ways. And so this little fridge magnet, which you could just totally replicate with a whiteboard on your fridge, has a list of things that people can do, and you can just take your little whiteboard marker and tick it. So when people come in and say, hey, how can I help? You can say, oh, there's a list on the fridge. And you don't even have to have a conversation about it. This was really, really helpful for me. So freezer meals is kind of the number one. And this is kind of like, you know, a lot of this is really basic stuff, but I think it is important, you know. So we made enough freezer meals for ourselves to last our first month after Ivy was born, which was great. And I'm really glad I did. But again, like, a baby doesn't stop being needy after 1 month. And so what I wish I'd done is, for people who wanted to help and who wanted to give me something, is I kind of wish I'd like either got them to give me a freezer meal in advance or set up a schedule. And there are a couple of websites here, which I've put on here, Sign Up Genius or Perfect Potluck, that allow people to organize groups of people to bring food on different days or to share food on different days. And it's really, really excellent. It's like a meal planning website for a group, and it sends out emails and reminds people and all sorts of things. So that's really, really helpful, because I think forgetting to eat is a real thing, and not being able to manage time-wise or hands-wise or brain-wise having good food is really important. What else we got here? Cleaning and hiring a cleaner. So I didn't want to have a really, like, a traditional baby shower. I didn't want like a cake that was made out of diapers or anything like that. I just, like, wasn't my style. And so a dear friend of mine, bless her heart, Jody, she organized a poker night for me, and half the pot came to us. So half the pot went to the winner and half the pot went to us, and we used that money to hire a cleaner, and it was the best decision I ever made. And oftentimes, I mean, cleaners are not in everybody's budget. That's for sure the case. But I would say, like, looking for university students in your area who might be willing to do stuff like that, some light cleaning, or just even tidying up a couple hours a week or even once a month could be beneficial. Again, like, asking for this as like baby shower presents, asking, you know, people when they come over, again, to like, here, can you like unfold my laundry for me? That would be really helpful. Those kind of things. I think just that practical help is really beneficial. Never show up without a coffee and something to eat, and ideally something substantial, not just a pastry, although a pastry is great. Please always come to my house with a coffee and a sandwich or a smoothie or a pizza or something that I can eat, because the likelihood is that I will not have eaten properly all day. And if you're coming over to cuddle the baby, hold them and I'll eat my food. And really having people who are going to allow you, or again, your clients, to vent or laugh or cry without judgment or offering advice unless I specifically ask for advice. I just think that's so vital, because again, unsolicited advice, we know it's like a dime a dozen and everyone's just trying to help. And it's like super frustrating, especially when you're tired and you know, you just really need space to like say what's on your mind, or to say that this is hard, and for to have somebody be like, yeah, it does seem really hard. I hear you. Okay. So nutrition, or things you can eat with one hand. Again, this was something else that surprised me, was how little hands I really literally had. And I used baby carriers all the time. Ivy has been worn in a baby carrier probably every single day of her life, up to and including today at 18 months and 30 pounds. And still, I just found like being able to eat something with one hand that I wasn't worried about spilling on her head was really important. And again, so I said it's this weird dichotomy that you need both extra nutrients and you need to lower the bar so you can just get food into your mouth like right now. Another thing, like, I've never really been a drive-through person. I mean, I'm a naturopath, right? So I like generally tend to have a pretty high bar as far as my food goes. And when your baby is asleep in the car and you know that if you take them out that they will wake up and you are so hungry, that is what drive-through was invented for. So I highly recommend people use it if they need it. Overnight oats. Now I have an almost finished, because I am a new parent, a little thing of recipes that I'm really happy to send out to people as well. I'm going to have it set up so that you can sign up to my newsletter, and then I'll send you out the information with a few of my just favorite standard, super, super easy recipes. But overnight oats are basically oats and sometimes chia seeds and some kind of fruit and some kind of liquid soaked overnight, and you can do it in one jar, and then you can open the jar and eat them straight out of there. And that is so hugely beneficial. It's probably the food that I've eaten the most since Ivy was born. For people with celiac disease or who don't tolerate oats, if there's like, they have problems with like gluten or sometimes like the cross reactivity with the protein that is in oats, chia seed pudding can do a very similar thing. Very, very easy and really easy to prep, like a few of them at once in 5 minutes, and then just have them every day throughout the week for breakfast or a snack. Or, I mean, when you are breastfeeding a child 24 hours a day, like what is time? It doesn't matter what time of day. If you're hungry, you need to eat. So having that kind of thing ready can be really helpful. Supermarket pizza eaten cold. This is where I'm talking about lowering the bar again. We often would either like order pizza or get a supermarket pizza and cook the whole thing and cut it up, and I would keep it in the fridge so that, again, I could just eat it with one hand whenever I needed to. This is really early days for me, but this was really helpful. And again, it was kind of something that I didn't really expect. I was like, oh, I'll just eat like lots of soup. Like, no, you're not going to eat soup over a baby's head. Sorry, it just feels too dangerous. Smoothies are really beneficial as well. Ivy hates the blender still, so I always had to have smoothies made by somebody else when we were outside or in another room because it makes her cry. But smoothies, and ideally you want your smoothies to have both protein and fat in them to make them substantial, because you need that protein and that fat to help stabilize blood sugar levels alongside fruit and veggies in there as well. Leftovers that can be eaten cold or require very little prep. Again, like things like big roasted vegetable salads that you can then portion out and just eat out of a container straight out of the fridge. That kind of thing is hugely important. Nuts and dried fruit or fresh fruit. Again, nuts are really high in protein and they have good fat in them, so they're really good for helping stabilize blood sugars and keep them going for a while. And that fresh or dried fruit has, you know, that little bit of fructose in it, that little bit of fruit sugar to help like bring the blood sugars up, and then the nuts help sustain. So those are kind of my favorite and top tips of snacky things. And it's pretty basic, but honestly, when I was so tired, this was the list I needed. These are the things that you can eat right now. These are the things that are ready for you right away. Fluids, this is another really important thing. Breastfeeding is super thirsty work, we always know, and it's easy to become dehydrated or like forget to drink in your exhausted haze. So having a water bottle on hand or several scattered throughout the house always is super important. Or if you have a partner with you or a support person, making that their job every time they see you about to sit down with the baby to bring you a glass of water, to bring your water bottle so that it's within reach of your hands. Herbal teas, again, this can be a great way to keep fluid levels up, as well as support other aspects of health like stress or milk production, nutrient levels, which I'm going to talk about herbs a little bit in the next section. And you can totally drink herbal teas cold. Like I would often suggest people like make them hot, drink them cold. Coffee? Let's be realistic. You're probably going to want to have a coffee or two. And I just think it's worthwhile having a conversation about it, because people are really going to want to drink caffeine. You know, it's a real thing when you're that tired. But if you are having trouble sleeping or feeling really irritable or anxious, it's important to be mindful that caffeine can be a contributing factor. Okay, supplements and herbs for new parents. This is my big fat disclaimer. If you have a health condition or on important medication, please see a qualified healthcare practitioner who is experienced with herbs and supplements, is knowledgeable about herb-drug interactions, and understands how to safely use herbs with other health conditions, and works with or refers to other medical practitioners if necessary. And then my little bit at the bottom that says too long, didn't read. If you broke your leg, you wouldn't go to the shoe store. And this was an analogy I used for many years when I worked in health shops. People would often come into a health shop after having been to like many medical professionals and specialists and things like that. And they would show up to the health shop and say, I have this major health condition and I'm on all these medications. What can you give me? And that is, I just think it's really not an appropriate time to ask somebody in a health shop. And like many health shop staff are hugely educated and very experienced. And without being able to take a full case and monitor your condition, it just is, it's unfair, it's not safe. So I really am quite like fussy about referring people to practitioners if they have a medical condition or on serious medication. I think it's really important. You know, you go to a shoe store, prevention, I need a little bit of arch support, that kind of thing. Not when you broke your leg. Then you're going to the emerge. So supplements. And again, an individualized approach is best. Not all of these will be relevant for everyone. And midwives in this group will know, right? You guys are doing blood tests and things like that anyways. So you're going to know who is low in iron, who is low in B12, those kind of things. I would often recommend a good multi with high B vitamins, and just keep taking your prenatal multi is a great way to go. Although not all prenatal multis are created equally. High B vitamins are helpful because B vitamins are water soluble nutrients. So you need to intake them regularly and you pee them out. And so you need to have like a regular intake. And they're really important for energy production and stress support and things like that. So our body needs these nutrients on a really regular ongoing basis to, you know, produce energy at a cellular level. And so that's really important. Iron and B12, depending on your levels. So that's a really easy blood test. I generally recommend that people get their ferritin checked as well, their stored iron, because you just want to know how much you have in the bank, right? And I often find people can have like reasonable hemoglobin levels, but really low ferritin, right? So they're sort of coping, but not really. And I often also, if people have clinical symptoms, but their ferritin is like within range, but say low normal, I will often recommend still a low dose iron supplement just to kind of support and boost them. B12 is another one that's really important. Anybody who has a fully plant-based diet, like vegan, should be taking a B12 supplement, because other than fortified yeast, there isn't really any B12 in plant foods. And low B12 can cause a type of anemia, and also can cause like weird neurological symptoms and like kind of low mood and things like that as well. So it's really important. These are my two main ones that I always test for people with low mood depression, whether it's like postnatal depression or just, you know, regular, not related to birth kind of and pregnancy. Magnesium. Magnesium is another really important nutrient. We need it in quite high doses, similar to kind of calcium, but it's harder to get out of our diet. And the kind of magnesium that you use matters. So that's why I've written here all technical, citrate or bisglycinate, because they're not all very well absorbed. And if you don't get a good absorbed magnesium, it just kind of goes out the toilet, basically. Magnesium, we don't have an easy blood test for, but clinical symptoms of low magnesium are things like muscle tension, restless legs, twitching eyes is a really good sign. Yeah, so magnesium can be really helpful, and it can really help with relaxation and sleep as well. Vitamin D. I like 1,000 to 2,000 IUs a day, depending on your levels, because I think everybody should get tested for vitamin D. And lots of people like to recommend vitamin D, and lots of GPs recommend vitamin D these days, but nobody's testing enough. And I think part of that is it's not covered in a lot of countries. I don't think it's covered in New Zealand. It wasn't when I was practicing there. It's not covered in BC. So it's about $60 in my experience in both places to get vitamin D tested. But I just think it's really important to make sure that your vitamin D levels, that you know what your baseline is before you dose, because the recommendations vary really widely. But vitamin D is really important, and it can be super beneficial for mood. It's an immune support sort of nutrient that we require for immune function. And it's, you know, recommended for infants now as well. So it's a really important one. Omega-3s, essential fatty acids that we get from fish or algae, and really important for inflammation and mood as well. And you can't really test for omega-3s, and it's an easy one to get through diet if you're having regular like oily fish or algae. I don't know about that one. You can't really get that. You have to buy that in a supplement, but it's an easy supplement to get. Okay, herbs for new parents. These are my favorite stress and energy ones. Teas, again, like I spoke about earlier, teas are great because they count towards fluid intake. They're gentle and generally quite safe. and you can make a large pot of tea and drink it throughout the day or night. So that's usually what I recommend people do, is make a big pot and, you know, just have it with you all the time. Nettle and oat straw are two of my favorite herbs to always put together. High in vitamins and minerals, and they really support the nervous system. It's another reason that overnight oats are really nice, is because oats actually have a really nice nerve calming effect as well. So those are the botanical names, like the Latin names that I've put in there. And I just always put those in because herbs have lots of different common names depending on where you are in the world. Chamomile, everyone's familiar with chamomile. We've all had a cup of chamomile tea at some point or another. Chamomile is calming. It is great for digestion. There's some good research that shows that it can help with bub too via breast milk. So babies with colic, it's a very safe herb to take. The only real concern with chamomile is it is part of the daisy family. So if people have a daisy allergy, then it can be it can cause an allergic reaction. Lemon balm. Lemon balm is beautiful. It's a mint family, so you can grow it super easy, put it in a pot or it will go crazy. Lemon balm is really uplifting. It's brilliant for anxiety and a nice digestive herb. So like in my ideal world, you'd be having like a chamomile lemon balm blend after dinner to help sort of with digestion, to help with colic, to help with that like cranky witching hour baby time, and to help you feel calm when you get a break to sleep. This we're going to go into a little bit more stress, adrenals, and rest. So these are herbs that you might more commonly find either as a tincture, which is a herb that's been extracted in water and alcohol, or a tablet or a powder. Ashwagandha, sometimes just called withania, Withania somnifera, is what we call an adaptogenic herb. So that means it helps the body adapt to stress, whether that stress is physical, mental, or emotional. It's been used as like a tonic for new parents for like thousands of years in Ayurvedic medicine. It is just my favorite herb of all time, I think. I love it. Licorice is another really good one. Licorice is an adrenal supporting herb, right? So when we have that sort of hypervigilant picture, you know, that's like our stress hormones, right? Our fight or flight mechanism. And when we have long-term stress, our cortisol levels are elevated and can be elevated for quite long periods of time. And licorice works specifically on those cortisol levels and with the adrenals. There is a caution with licorice when it comes to long-term high dose and elevated blood pressure. So if people have high blood pressure, so obviously this can be contraindicated in pregnancy because you don't want to mess with high blood pressure in pregnancy. But it's really, the issue really comes with long-term high dose use, not sort of like a cup of tea now and again. But again, if people have a condition like high blood pressure, hypertension, and they're medicated or not, they should be chatting to a practitioner about it. Passion flower is my other favorite herb. It's really helpful for sleep and anxiety without being sedating. So it's like not dangerous to take, you know, you're not like taking a Zopiclone and then not going to wake up when your baby cries. And it's not habit forming either. And this was my friend Sky who first introduced me to this postnatal depletion. She recommended that because I needed help and I needed somebody else to tell me what to do, keep a little bottle of tincture and just take a few drops as needed, which was super helpful for me. You can also get passion flower in a tea. If any of you lovely people live like North Island, New Zealand, you can grow passion flower. It's just the flower before the fruit comes. It's not those banana passion flower or passion fruit that grow in the South Island though, sorry. But you'll know what they look like, right? They have those really crazy swirly little middles and it's a gorgeous, gorgeous flower. Anyways, you can dry that and make your own tea with it. Beautiful. Now, I wouldn't be like a holistic practitioner if I didn't talk about the real self-care stuff, right? It's easy to use herbs and supplements almost as a band-aid. And I don't want to promote that, but I do want to say that for me, like a lot of the self-care suggestions felt unrealistic and unattainable to me. Go to a yoga class, take a long bath with Epsom salts, meditate. And I was like, I can't even wash my face. Like, when am I doing these other things, you know? So I really found it important to like focus on what I could do and what was helpful for me. So walks alone outside, even 5 minutes. And again, like putting this stuff into place ahead of time. Ivy was a contact napper. Like I could barely scoot away every time she would have a sleep. But if I could sneak away, I would just do one sun salutation. So just to get a little bit of blood flow, just to like reconnect to my breath, just to have a minute where I wasn't thinking about being a parent. Legs up the wall or child's pose. Again, these are nice little yoga practices that are super, super simple and easy. Legs up the wall is really nice for regulating blood pressure. Child's pose, you get that pressure on your forehead and it just feels so good. It kind of compresses your digestive organs, which is really good for supporting good digestion. Those were things that you could do for like literally 20 seconds if you needed to, and that was really beneficial. And then distraction, honestly, having distraction and remembering that I was an adult and a human being outside of being a parent was really helpful. I watched some comedy, I watched some gardening shows, I watched a lot of YouTube. I listened to a lot of podcasts because podcasts are something you can listen to, you know, while you're parenting at the same time. Those kind of things were really helpful. And I listened to podcasts that were not about parenting specifically. I remembered that I had other interests and that was really helpful. And sleeping in, obviously sleep is a huge factor and it's not something that can necessarily easily be fixed in those early days, but sleeping in or going to bed early or having naps on the weekend when my partner was home was really, really vital for me. Okay, guys, we're almost done because I know I'm going a little bit over time here, sorry. So tips for taking some herbs and supplements, you will forget. So make it as easy as possible. And this was a real recommendation from a friend of mine who was like, you have all these things, but you're not taking them. And I always say like, nothing works if it's in your cupboard, right? So keeping supplements on the table where you eat breakfast, get a pill divider and put everyday supplements into them so that you remember and that they're right in front of you and you don't have to like dig through cupboard or, you know, pills in the cupboard. Herbs on your bathroom counter. So if you're taking a tincture, you know, keep them in the bathroom and do it when you brush your teeth because you're going to need water to dilute or chase your tinctures if you're taking them that way. And just remembering that done is better than perfect. Taking things in whatever form you are the most likely to take them, regardless of like the aspiration of which way is the best way. The best way to take it is the way that you're going to take it. And getting professional support. So there's my logo again, just a little plug. If all this sounds overwhelming, go back to that first tip and ask for help. A qualified practitioner should be able to help you choose appropriate herbs and supplements. I'm happy to provide personal referrals if I know somebody in your area. So I have a pretty sweet network of naturopaths and herbalists around Canada and the States and also New Zealand, and I know a few Australians, so really happy for people to email me. And I've just put like a few of the organizations for natural health practitioners, Canada, the US, New Zealand, and Australia to look at. And again, you can get these notes afterwards. And resources stuff. So this is my website, pahudakawahealth.com. That's me. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. Using, you know, your midwives and doulas as resources. I just like couldn't have loved my midwives more. They were just so hugely beneficial to me. It was amazing. I also really love Aviva Rom as far as internet support goes, because there's a lot of bad internet information out there. But Aviva Rom is a herbalist, a midwife, and a medical doctor. So I feel like her articles and books on natural support for pregnancy, breastfeeding, parenting children are really sound information. There's also a link here to an article about postnatal depletion specifically by a functional MD who practices in Australia. And I just said ignore that the article is on Goop because I think the information is really useful. And that is it, guys. I'm sorry if I talk so fast.
Oh, you have just done so well. Thank you for putting in so much really solid information. And I think everybody appreciated you talking fast because you gave us more information. So that's all good.
You can all get the notes. So
yeah. And of course you could. So tomorrow, you will all get an automatic email from Zoom that will give you instructions on how to get copies of Emily's PowerPoint slides if you would like them. Absolutely, that's all good. And we've we've had a few questions that have come through that we've sort of managed to cover off over the time. But please, if anybody's got any other questions that you've got for Emily on postnatal depletion, I do love how you say, you know, it's not an official diagnostic term, but boy, everybody knows what it means.
Totally.
Yeah. One of the things I wouldn't mind asking is with the various different herbs that you've mentioned, if somebody was buying these things, you know, in advance, ideally, so that they're all there and all ready for them, you know, to be using afterwards to prevent that depletion, or help sort of counterbalance it, what would you suggest that they, you know, have in advance, and how the form of them, you know, what would be
For sure.
yeah, tablets, or what would be
exactly what
teas,
you mean.
or what do you think is like the optimum shopping list?
I think so. What I would do is ideally I would buy herbs from a health shop rather than the supermarket, because I think the quality of herbs really matters. So there's a real difference between culinary grade herbs and medicinal grade herbs. So most health shops will have really good, I know like in the States and Canada and New Zealand, they will have good options for you. So ideally I would be getting, like, I would look at for a chamomile tea or a mixture chamomile lemon balm tea, something like that. I would be looking, most of those supplements are going to be tablets. I think my
So
baby's
just say like with nettle and oat straw, is that one that is often combined, or would they be two different supplements generally? Or
nettle oat straw is often combined by herbalists. So ideally for nettle oat straw, you'd be buying loose tea for both of those and combining them together in a loose tea. And then you can just use a coffee plunger to make them, right? You can use, or like you get a big infuser kind of thing. That's what I do, either a coffee plunger or a big pot of infused that you can make like a tablespoon into it, make a big pot of it, and then you've got it, and you can let it sit for ages. And then you can like put it in jars in the fridge and then pull those out and have cold, you know, iced tea.
Okay. Would there be a little sort of like different time of the day that you would be having your nettle oat straw tea in comparison to, say, your chamomile lemon balm tea?
Like I said, I mean, the main thing is in is better than, you know, done is better than perfect. That's for sure. Okay. Nettle oat straw, I would say, is like nicer during the day. It would be like a little bit energizing, but it's not stimulating. Like there's no reason that you couldn't drink it at night kind of thing. But chamomile, lemon balm, they're not sedating enough to like put you to sleep, but they are definitely nice ones to have before bed, but they can also totally be drunk throughout the day as well.
Right. So. Okay. And the ashwagandha, or how?
Ashwagandha, you're probably going to find here, Ivy. You can come meet. Here's
Ivy. Hi.
Hey. You want to say hello?
Hi, Ivy.
Yeah, ashwagandha, you're probably going to find more in a tablet or a tincture or a powder sometimes. So it's like traditional use in Ayurveda was actually a powder in warm milk. Often before bed, and it's like botanical name Withania somnifera, right? Somnifera means like sleep, and so yeah, that's often how it was used. So yeah, you can sometimes find it in powder, and you can put it into smoothies if you want to. It's got not the best flavor though. You can mask it if you got enough berries, but yeah, or yeah, a tablet or a tincture with Withania is probably what you'd be looking at. For some reason, it's never in tea, probably because it's not nice.
Right. Okay. Oh, that's just so interesting. Let me just check. Is there any? Oh, yes, we've got a question here. Another one. Okay. Oh, somebody was asking if for somebody who is vegetarian, what would be your best recommendation for replacing fish oil?
Oh yeah, algae. Absolutely. So it used to be that the vegetarian omega-3s were never very absorbable. Oftentimes like flax was recommended, or chia seeds, which are good sources.
Oil, yes.
Yeah, are good
traditional sources, replacement.
Yeah, but maybe not as well absorbed as fish oil. But now we know that the main source of the omega-3s, oh, are you mad? In the the main source of omegas in the fish oil actually comes from algae. So you can get really good algae supplements that have omega-3 that are quite high dose omegas. Are you done now? You want to say bye-bye? Do you want me to help?
Fantastic. Hopefully, okay. Oh, that's just wonderful. All right. Well, look, I think that we're just going to wind it up here. So if anybody's got any other questions, just quickly shove them through. Otherwise, there were so many synchronicities, I have to say, with some of your advice there. As a midwife over years, that I've always sort of said, you know, definitely fill your freezer full of wonderful, nutritious one-dish wonders that are super easy to heat up.
That's it. When you've got the practical experience of this stuff, right? You know what people kind of need again and again and again, right?
Yeah, we don't need a diaper cake. We just
we don't need a diaper cake.
We just need more meals.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And just another couple of comments with regards. Oh, okay. Somebody's asking the question: is the algae kelp?
No, it's a specific omega-3. I don't know exactly what, I can't remember off the top of my head what it comes from. If you're in New Zealand, I think Lifestream make a vegetarian omega-3. That's really good. And in Canada, I forget the brand, but people can email me if they want specifics. I can send you information. That's no problem. But I'm pretty sure it's Lifestream that makes the algae omega-3 in New Zealand anyways. I know that.
Oh, that's wonderful. So just two other last tiny little comments I'll throw in there, just my 2 cents. With regards to the comment about women having coffee when they're breastfeeding, what I would say is, of course, women are going to have some coffee. Well,
exactly.
you know, but the best time for them to do it is straight after they've given that baby a feed, and they know that baby is going down for a sleep. You know, so if you know baby's going to be sleeping for the next 2-3 hours, have your coffee straight away afterwards, and then it should be sort of more out of your system by the time that you're feeding that baby again. And the other hint I would say is that with regards to drinking water through the day, I've definitely come across women who have had water bottles around, but they actually lose track and realize that they kind of get to the end of the day and they haven't really sipped on it. So, or not that much. So what I would say to women is, every time you sit down to breastfeed your baby, scull a large glass of water. And you just always have to know, every time the milk's going out, the water has to come in. And that's just a really easy habit, and then you can kind of sip on water the rest of the day. But anyway, look, we are really out of time. Oh, we've got some more. Let me just double check these questions. Oh yeah, no, I think we've got those questions all answered now. So look, that is wonderful. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been really fun.
Brilliant. And thank you everybody for catching us live. I hope to see you next week. And stay safe everybody, and have a lovely week.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks so much, Kathy. Take care.
Bye.
You want to say bye-bye?